The morning sun rose over New Sol Colony like it did every day for the past 15 years. Captain Lee Dae-ho stood on his balcony watching the purple and gold colors paint the alien sky. He smiled as he heard children laughing in the streets below. This was what peace looked like. Down in the market square, 8-year-old Park Si-woo ran between the stalls chasing his best friend Kim Yoo-jin. The two boys dodged around the vendors selling earth vegetables to curious alien visitors. Their mothers, Hanbo-ra and Choi Yoon-ji, watched from nearby benches. They were happy their children could grow up in such a safe place. New Sol Colony was home to 12,000 humans. Most were families who had volunteered to leave Earth and start a new life among the stars. They had built a beautiful settlement with dome-covered buildings that protected them from the harsh alien weather. The streets were clean and safe. Children played without fear. The Galactic Empire had welcomed humanity 30 years ago. The alien leaders were impressed by how quickly humans learned new technology. They liked how humans could talk to different species and solve problems peacefully. Humans became valuable members of the galactic community. They worked as translators, engineers, and peacekeepers on dozens of worlds. The Empire Council of Species had given humanity special status as promising newcomers. This meant humans could build colonies like New Sol. They could trade with other species and explore new worlds. It seemed like humanity had found its place among the stars. But not everyone was happy about human success. Some of the older alien species thought humans were growing too powerful too quickly. The reptilian Vorthak Empire faction was especially worried. They whispered in council meetings about the aggressive mammals and their dangerous ideas about individual freedom. Supreme Commander Thek Morvain led these voices of opposition. He was a powerful Vorthak general with cold yellow eyes and scales, like black metal. He believed humans were a threat to the natural order of the galaxy. He thought they needed to be taught a lesson before they became too strong to control. The humans living on New Sol had no idea about these political problems. They were too busy building their new life. They had schools where human and alien children learned together. They had hospitals that treated patients from many different species. They had parks where families could relax and enjoy the alien flowers that grew in rainbow colors. Captain Lee had been a military officer on Earth before becoming the civilian governor of New Sol. He was proud of how peaceful the colony had become. Every week, ships arrived bringing new settlers and trading goods. The humans had learned to grow alien crops and had made friends with neighboring star systems. The children were the heart of the colony. They ran through the streets speaking both human languages and alien words they had learned from visitors. They played games that mixed Earth traditions with alien customs. They drew pictures of spaceships and alien animals with the innocent joy that only children possess. Si-woo wanted to be a starship pilot when he grew up. He spent hours watching ships land and take off from the spaceport. Yoo-jin dreamed of becoming a scientist like her father who studied alien plants. The other children had similar dreams of adventure and discovery among the stars. Dr. Yoon Min-ho ran the Colony Research Center. He focused on agriculture and medicine, trying to help humans and aliens live better lives. His laboratories were always busy with peaceful projects. They developed new medicines and better ways to grow food on alien worlds. Teacher Song Hye-ran managed the school where 43 children learned together. She taught them about Earth history and alien cultures. She encouraged them to dream big and work hard. She believed these children would grow up to be the bridge between humanity and the rest of the galaxy. The colony had its own small defense force, but they rarely had anything to do except help lost travelers and rescue cats from tall trees. Captain Lee believed their best defense was friendship with their alien neighbors. He worked hard to maintain good relationships with every species that visited their world. Trade was booming. Human merchants sold Earth vegetables, fruits, and handmade crafts to alien customers who found human products exotic and interesting. In return, they bought alien technology, art, and rare materials that helped the colony grow and prosper. Everyone seemed happy with the arrangement. The morning Si-woo and Yoo-jin were playing their innocent games. The long-range sensors detected ships approaching from deep space. Captain Lee assumed it was another routine diplomatic mission. The Empire often sent representatives to check on new colonies and make sure everything was running smoothly. He ordered the standard welcome preparations. The landing pads were cleared and cleaned. Translator devices were checked and charged. A small ceremony was planned to greet the visiting officials. Captain Lee put on his best uniform and prepared to give another boring but polite welcome speech. The children continued playing in the streets, unaware that their carefree childhood was about to end forever. Their parents went about their daily routines, working in the shops and laboratories and schools. Everyone felt safe and secure in their peaceful corner of the galaxy. The approaching fleet was larger than usual, but Captain Lee was not worried. Sometimes the Empire sent big ships to show off their power or to impress new colonies. He had seen it before. The aliens liked their ceremonies and displays of authority. As the ships grew closer, the sensors showed they were Vorthak vessels bristling with weapons. But even this did not alarm Captain Lee. The Vorthak were known for their military traditions and heavily armed ships. It was just their way of showing respect and importance. The first ship landed with a thunderous roar that shook the ground and made the children stop playing to watch. More ships followed until the sky was dark with alien vessels. The adults began to feel nervous but still assumed this was some kind of official inspection. Supreme Commander Thek Morvain stepped off his flagship surrounded by tall, armored soldiers. His cold, reptilian eyes scanned the human settlement with obvious disgust. His translator device crackled as he prepared to speak words that would change everything. Captain Lee walked forward with a welcoming smile, ready to greet another alien dignitary. He had no idea he was about to hear accusations that would destroy his peaceful world and start the bloodiest war in galactic history. The last normal morning in New Sol Colony was about to become a nightmare that would echo across the stars. The Vorthak fleet blocked out the sun as dozens of warships descended from the sky. Their hulls were black as midnight and covered with weapons that could turn mountains into dust. Supreme Commander Thek Morvain stepped down from his flagship, like death itself walking among the living. His soldiers spread through the settlement like a disease. They were tall creatures with scales that gleamed like metal armor. Their eyes glowed red in their reptilian faces. Each one carried weapons that hummed with deadly energy. The peaceful morning turned into a waking nightmare. Captain Lee walked forward, trying to maintain his diplomatic smile. He had dealt with difficult alien officials before. Usually they just wanted to show their authority and then leave. He extended his hand in the universal gesture of greeting, but Morvain ignored it completely. The translator device on Morvain's chest crackled to life. His voice was cold and harsh, like metal scraping against stone. By order of the Galactic Council, this colony is under immediate investigation for crimes against galactic peace, he announced. The words hit Captain Lee like a physical blow. The accusations that followed were insane. Morvain claimed New Sol Colony had been developing illegal weapons. He said the humans were planning to overthrow the Galactic Empire. He accused them of corrupting other species with dangerous human ideas about freedom and independence. Captain Lee demanded to see evidence of these outrageous charges. Morvain simply smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. In the Empire courts, the word of a Supreme Commander was evidence enough. He had spent months carefully planting false data and bribing witnesses to support his lies. Dr. Yoon Min-ho tried to explain that their research focused only on medicine and farming. He offered to show Morvain through the laboratories where they developed new crops and treatments for alien diseases. The Vorthak commander showed no interest in the truth. Teacher Song Hairan attempted to take Morvain to the school. She wanted him to see how human and alien children learned together in perfect harmony. She hoped he would understand that humans were peaceful people who only wanted friendship with other species. Morvain brushed her aside like an annoying insect. The Vorthak soldiers began searching every building in the colony. They destroyed computers and scattered papers looking for evidence that did not exist. They questioned colonists with threats and violence. Many humans were beaten for simply asking what was happening to their home. Hanbora clutched her son Siwoo close as armored aliens smashed through their apartment. They turned over furniture and broke precious family photos brought from Earth. Siwoo cried as strange creatures with glowing eyes destroyed his toys and scattered his books across the floor. Choi, Yoonji tried to protect her daughter Yujin, but there was nowhere to hide. The soldiers searched everywhere with mechanical efficiency. They seemed disappointed when they found nothing more dangerous than kitchen knives and gardening tools. The lack of evidence only made them more suspicious and angry. Within hours, Morvain declared the entire colony guilty of treason against the Galactic Empire. The trial had lasted less time than a school lunch break. There had been no witnesses for the defense and no chance to present evidence of innocence. The verdict was predetermined before the first ship had landed. The sentence was swift and brutal, beyond imagination. All adult colonists would be transported to a distant penal world where they would spend the rest of their lives breaking rocks in underground mines. But Morvain had reserved a special punishment for the children that would send a message to all humanity. The 43 children of New Sol Colony would be executed by hanging in the central square. The execution would be broadcast across the galaxy as a warning to any species that dared to challenge Vorthak authority. It would show the universe what happened to those who opposed the natural order. Parents screamed and fought as soldiers dragged their children away from them. Little Siwoo reached desperately for his mother's hand as armored claws pulled him toward the town square. Yujin cried for her father as rough alien hands grabbed her small arms and lifted her off the ground. The children ranged from toddlers barely able to walk to teenagers on the edge of adulthood. They were confused and terrified, not understanding why the friendly aliens they had learned to trust were suddenly treating them like dangerous criminals. Many wet themselves in fear as they were lined up beneath hastily constructed gallows. Captain Lee watched in horror as wooden beams were erected in the same square where children had played that very morning. The Vorthak worked with grim efficiency, building instruments of death where moments before there had been laughter and joy. The speed of the transformation was as shocking as the cruelty itself. He managed to send one desperate transmission before the communications array was destroyed by alien weapons. His message traveled faster than light, reaching Earth in 6 hours. It contained only 3 words that would echo through history and change the course of galactic civilization. They took our children. The execution began at sunset. Morvain wanted the golden light to make good pictures for the galactic broadcast. He stood on a platform overlooking the square, like an ancient king watching gladiators die for his entertainment. His yellow eyes showed no emotion as small human children were led to their deaths. The parents were forced to watch every moment. Vorthak soldiers held their heads up and kept their eyes open so they could not look away or close their eyes. This was part of the punishment. They would carry the image of their children dying for the rest of their miserable lives in the prison mines. One by one, the children were lifted onto the platforms. Some cried for their parents. Others faced death with the strange courage that only children possess. The youngest did not understand what was happening. The oldest tried to comfort the smaller ones even as they faced their own deaths. The broadcast went out across the galaxy, showing the execution of 43 innocent human children. It was meant to be a demonstration of Vorthak power and a warning to rebellious species. Instead, it became the spark that would ignite the most devastating war in galactic history. The last image transmitted from New Sol Colony showed Captain Lee on his knees weeping as he watched the children he had sworn to protect swing lifeless in the alien wind. Above them, Supreme Commander Thek Morvain smiled with satisfaction, believing he had taught humanity a lesson they would never forget. He was right about one thing. Humanity would never forget this day. But the lesson they learned was not the one he intended to teach. The emergency session of the United Earth government lasted exactly 14 minutes. President Kim So-ra stood at the podium with Captain Lee's transmission in her hands. Her voice shook with barely controlled rage as she read the 3 words aloud. They took our children. Every representative in the chamber had already seen the horrific broadcast. 43 innocent human children murdered while their parents screamed helplessly. The images were burned into their minds forever. The peaceful galaxy they had worked so hard to join had revealed its true face. The vote for war was unanimous. No debate was needed. No discussion was required. Every human representative understood that this act of evil could not go unanswered. The Galactic Empire had made the gravest mistake in its 10,000-year history. They had awakened something that should have stayed sleeping. Admiral Oh Kyung-soo did not wait for official orders. Within 1 hour, every human warship in known space received the same message. Return to Earth immediately. We go to war. The response was instant and overwhelming. Humanity was coming home to prepare for revenge. Merchant ships abandoned profitable trade routes and began the long journey back to Earth. Military vessels broke off from peacekeeping missions across dozens of worlds. Even civilian ships with basic defensive systems started moving toward the Sol system. Every human in space wanted to be part of what was coming. Dr. Kang Jae-min worked frantically in his laboratory deep beneath the Earth Defense Headquarters. For years, he had studied alien biology for peaceful purposes. He had developed medicines to help sick aliens and understood how different species could live together safely. Now his knowledge would serve a darker purpose. He knew exactly how to kill every species in the Galactic Empire. The Vorthak with their acidic scale defenses, the crystalline Zephirites with their silicon-based biology, the gaseous Nebulans with their complex atmospheric requirements. He began developing weapons that would turn their own biology against them. The transformation of human society was swift and absolute. Every factory on Earth retooled for war production. Assembly lines that had made consumer goods began churning out weapons and armor. Scientists abandoned peaceful research projects to focus on military applications. The entire planet became a weapon pointed at the stars. Children attended schools that now taught combat tactics alongside mathematics. Teenagers learned to maintain weapons and armor instead of just playing sports. Adults worked double shifts in factories and shipyards. Everyone understood that humanity was preparing for its first interstellar war. Engineer Park Do-hyun led teams that modified human ships with technologies the Empire had never seen. Humans had always been innovative, but now they turned that creativity toward destruction. They developed cloaking systems that bent light around ship hulls, making them invisible to alien sensors. New weapons emerged from human laboratories at an incredible pace. Energy cannons that could punch through any known shield technology. Kinetic projectiles that moved at nearly the speed of light. Missiles that could track targets across star systems and detonate with the force of small suns. Most terrifying of all were the biological weapons. Dr. Kang had created viruses and bacteria specifically designed to target alien DNA. A single contaminated supply ship could wipe out entire worlds. Alien immune systems had no defense against diseases that had never existed in nature. The human fleet grew larger every day as ships returned from across the galaxy. Within 6 months, Earth possessed the most powerful navy in human history. 3,000 warships each carrying weapons designed to kill specific alien species. The crews were all volunteers, but there had been no shortage of them. Commander Lim Yuri trained special forces units for the ground war that would follow. Her soldiers learned to fight in zero-gravity and hostile alien environments. They studied every species in the Empire, learning their fears and weaknesses. They would show the galaxy what humans could do when they embraced their warrior nature. The training was brutal and efficient. Human soldiers learned to use alien weapons against their creators. They practiced fighting in the extreme conditions found on alien worlds. Most importantly, they learned to feel no mercy for enemies who had murdered human children. Intelligence officers worked around the clock gathering information about Vorthak military installations. They identified every ship that had participated in the New Sol massacre. They located the home worlds of every alien who had supported the executions. Long lists of targets were prepared for the coming war. President Kim addressed the nation one final time before the fleet departed. Her words were broadcast to every human settlement in the galaxy. "We never wanted this war," she said. "We came to the stars in peace, seeking friendship with alien civilizations. They chose to murder our children. Now they will learn what happens when peaceful humans decide to embrace war." The message was clear and simple. Humanity would not fight a defensive war trying to protect their remaining colonies. They would carry the fight to every world that had supported the massacre. This would be a war of extermination, species against species, until justice was done. Factory workers cheered as the last weapons were loaded onto departing ships. Children waved goodbye to fathers and mothers heading off to war. Everyone understood that this was more than just military action. This was humanity coming of age among the stars in blood and fire. The alien species had studied human history and thought they understood what they were dealing with. They had read about human wars on Earth and dismissed them as primitive conflicts between backward societies. They failed to understand what those wars had taught humanity about organized violence. Admiral O stood on the bridge of his flagship watching Earth shrink behind them. His fleet was the largest military force humanity had ever assembled. But more than that, it represented something new in galactic history. An entire species united in purpose, focused on a single goal: the complete destruction of everyone who had harmed human children. The journey to Vorthak space would take 3 months. 3 months for the aliens to realize what was coming for them. 3 months to understand that they had not taught humanity a lesson. They had given humanity a reason to teach the galaxy what total war really meant. Behind the departing fleet, Earth continued preparing for what might be a very long conflict. More ships were being built. More weapons were being developed. More soldiers were being trained. If the first wave was not enough, there would be a second and a third, and as many as it took. The peaceful civilization that had joined the Galactic Empire 30 years ago was gone forever. In its place was something far more dangerous. Humanity had finally found its place among the stars, and that place was at the top of the food chain. The human war fleet emerged from hyperspace like death itself, materializing among the stars. Admiral O's strategy was elegantly simple and terrifyingly effective. Humanity would not fight a conventional war with battle lines and honorable combat. They would hunt down every Vorthak installation, every government facility, every ship that had been involved in murdering human children. The first target was Kepler Station, a massive Vorthak supply depot that supported their military expansion into human space. The station was home to 50,000 aliens and protected by energy shields that could withstand planet-killing weapons. It had never been successfully attacked in 300 years of operation. Commander Baek Soo-jin approached in her stealth, frigate invisible to every sensor the Vorthak possessed. Her ship had been modified with human cloaking technology that bent light and energy around the hull. To alien eyes, it simply did not exist. She moved through their defensive perimeter like a ghost seeking revenge. The Vorthak detected something wrong when their shield generators began failing one by one. Human infiltration teams had been aboard the station for weeks, posing as maintenance workers and traders. They had planted explosives and computer viruses throughout the massive structure. By the time alarms began sounding, it was already too late. Commander Beck's ship materialized inside the station shields like magic. Her weapons were specially designed to exploit Vorthak biology. Energy beams that turned their protective scales into burning acid. Projectiles that released gases toxic only to reptilian nervous systems. Sonic weapons that shattered their crystalline bone structure. The aliens screamed as their own defenses became instruments of torture. Their scales bubbled and melted. Their bones cracked like breaking glass. Their nervous systems shut down as toxins flooded their bloodstreams. 10,000 Vorthak soldiers died in the first 20 minutes of the assault. The pattern repeated across dozens of star systems as human forces struck without warning or mercy. They targeted military bases, government centers, and civilian populations with equal ruthlessness. The Empire fleets designed for honorable combat between civilized species could not adapt to humanity's guerrilla tactics and biological warfare. Lieutenant Colonel Shin Dong-wook specialized in psychological warfare that drove entire alien populations insane. His team had discovered that certain sound frequencies could disrupt alien neural patterns, causing hallucinations, paranoia, and eventually death. Whole planets descended into madness as inhabitants turned on each other. The broadcasts were subtle, at first mixed in with normal entertainment and communication channels. Alien civilians went about their daily lives not realizing they were being slowly driven mad by frequencies their ears could not consciously detect. Within weeks, entire cities erupted in violence as neighbors attacked neighbors. On the industrial world of Vorthak 7, factory workers began seeing enemies in every shadow. They attacked their supervisors with manufacturing tools. They sabotaged production lines. They barricaded themselves in their homes, convinced that invasion forces were coming for them. The planet economy collapsed as society tore itself apart. The Galactic Council met an emergency session demanding that humanity cease their terrorist activities and submit to imperial justice. They threatened economic sanctions and military intervention. They offered to negotiate a peaceful settlement. President Kim's response was broadcast on every channel in the galaxy. The message was simple and chilling. A single image of the 43 children who had died at New Sol Colony, followed by a countdown timer showing how many days the war would continue. The timer read until every Vorthak is dead. Below it was another number showing how many aliens had been killed so far. Other species in the Empire began to panic as they realized the gentle diplomatic humans they had known were gone forever. These new humans fought with cold efficiency that terrified veteran soldiers who had served in wars for centuries. Imperial commanders found themselves outmatched by human officers barely out of their 20s. The technology gap that had once favored the Empire meant nothing when humans could turn alien biology against itself. Vorthak ships with impenetrable armor were destroyed by weapons that made their hulls radioactive. Zephyrite fleets with crystal-based computers were crippled by viruses that shattered their silicon minds. Captain Lee Dae-ho had survived the New Sol massacre as one of only 12 adults who were off-world during the attack. Now he commanded a human assault fleet hunting for Supreme Commander Thek Morvain, the architect of the children's execution. His ship carried a special cargo of revenge. Every planet that had voted to support the New Sol operation found itself under attack by forces that seemed to appear from nowhere. Human ships would decloak long enough to deploy biological weapons, then vanish before defensive fleets could respond. Entire worlds began dying from diseases that targeted specific alien DNA. The psychological impact was devastating. Alien populations lived in constant terror, never knowing when invisible human ships might appear overhead. Their own governments had lost control of the situation. Military leaders who had once seemed invincible were being systematically hunted down and killed. Supreme Commander Thek Morvain watched his empire crumble from his flagship, hidden deep in Vorthak space. Every day brought news of another defeat, another system fallen to human forces. His own soldiers whispered of surrender, terrified by reports of what happened to Vorthak prisoners. The humans did not just kill their captives, they studied them, learned from them, used that knowledge to develop even more effective ways to kill. Vorthak prisoners were dissected alive while human scientists took notes. Their screams were recorded and broadcast to Vorthak worlds as psychological warfare. Morvain had expected the humans to fight like other species with honor codes and rules of engagement. Instead, they fought like the predators they had once been on ancient Earth. They showed no mercy to enemies who had shown no mercy to their children. Every atrocity committed at New Sol was repaid 100-fold. The Empire military doctrine had assumed that humans would respond to the massacre with diplomatic protests and economic sanctions. They had not prepared for a species that would abandon every principle of civilized warfare to seek absolute revenge. They were fighting an enemy that had nothing left to lose. Admiral O received daily intelligence reports showing the progression of human victory across the galaxy. Vorthak resistance was crumbling as their supply lines were cut and their populations were systematically poisoned. Other species were beginning to surrender rather than risk sharing the Vorthak fate. But the Admiral was not satisfied with mere victory. The humans had come not just to win a war, but to send a message that would echo through galactic history for 10,000 years. Any species that harmed human children would face complete extermination. There would be no exceptions and no mercy. The hunt was far from over. Morvain and his inner circle were still alive, still commanding scattered fleets, still believing they could find some way to salvage their civilization. They would learn soon enough that humanity had already decided their fate. The only question remaining was how much of the galaxy would burn before justice was complete. The siege of Vorthak Prime lasted exactly 73 hours, 1 hour for each year the reptilian species had been members of the Galactic Empire. Commander Lim Yuri had infiltrated the planet weeks earlier with her special forces teams disguised as traders, diplomats, and even medical aid workers bringing supplies to help with the mysterious plague that was killing Vorthak civilians. The plague was not mysterious at all. Dr. Kang's biological weapons had been deployed through the water supply targeting specific genetic markers that made Vorthak scales produce acid when exposed to human-developed catalysts. The proud reptilian warriors found themselves literally dissolving as their own defensive features became weapons of self-destruction. Hospitals overflowed with victims whose scales had begun eating through their flesh. Medical staff tried desperately to treat patients whose biology had been turned against them by human science. There was no cure because the weapons had been designed specifically to be incurable by any known Vorthak medicine. The planetary defense grid had been sabotaged from within by human infiltrators who had spent months learning every detail of Vorthak military systems. When Admiral O's main fleet arrived, they found a world already dying from within its defenses, crippled its population in chaos, its government paralyzed by the horror of what was happening to their people. Supreme Commander Thek Morvain barricaded himself in his fortress surrounded by the last few thousand loyal troops on the planet. He still believed the humans would demand surrender, negotiate terms, show the mercy that had characterized their species for decades. He had studied human history and convinced himself they would eventually return to their peaceful nature. The fortress was an impressive structure built into a mountain and protected by energy barriers that could withstand direct hits from orbital bombardment. Its underground chambers could house 50,000 defenders and contained supplies to last for years. Morvain felt safe behind walls that had never been breached in their 300-year history. Captain Lee Dae-ho walked through the fortress, entrance like he was strolling through a park on Earth. The massive doors simply opened for him because human hackers had taken control of every system on the planet. The energy barriers flickered and died. The automated defenses turned to attack Vorthak soldiers instead of protecting them. Behind Lee came human soldiers carrying equipment that made Vorthak weapons look like primitive clubs. They wore armor that could deflect any energy beam the aliens possessed. Their faces were hidden behind helmets, but their movements spoke of cold professional efficiency. These were not warriors seeking glory, but exterminators doing a necessary job. Morvain met them in his command center, surrounded by the trappings of his rank and authority. Golden decorations covered the walls. Ancient weapons displayed his people's military heritage. Holographic displays showed the tactical situation across the galaxy, though most of them now showed only red warning symbols indicating human victories. "You wanted to teach my species about consequences," Lee said, removing his helmet to reveal the face that had haunted Morvain's dreams for months. The human looked older than his years, aged by grief and rage. His eyes held no warmth, no mercy, no trace of the diplomatic smile he had once worn when greeting alien visitors. Behind Lee, human soldiers dragged screaming Vorthak civilians into the command center. Men, women, and children were forced to their knees before hastily constructed gallows that looked exactly like those used on New Sol Colony. The symbolism was deliberate and unmistakable. Humanity had learned well from their teachers. Morvain recognized some of the civilians. They included his own offspring, his mates, his closest advisors, and their families. 4,300 Vorthak lives, exactly 100 times the number of human children who had been murdered. The mathematics of revenge had been calculated, precisely by accountants who dealt in blood. "Today you learn what happens when you murder human children," Lee continued as the first Vorthak civilian was lifted onto the gallows platform. The execution would be broadcast across the galaxy just as the Vorthak had broadcast their massacre of human children. But this time, the message would be different. The killing began at the same time of day the human children had died. Lee had timed it perfectly to match the original atrocity. One by one, the Vorthak civilians were hanged while their supreme commander was forced to watch. His own family died before his eyes as he finally understood the true cost of his decision. The broadcast went out on every channel in the galaxy, showing the systematic execution of Vorthak civilians. Human voices provided commentary explaining exactly why each person was dying. They had voted to support the massacre. They had cheered when human children were murdered. They had celebrated the lesson being taught to humanity. Planet after planet surrendered as news of Vorthak Prime's fate spread through the Empire. Alien governments that had supported the New Sol operation frantically tried to distance themselves from the decision. Species that had remained neutral begged for human mercy. Everyone finally understood what total war meant. The other species, In the Empire realized this conflict would only end with complete extermination of everyone who had supported the massacre. Humans had abandoned their principles of proportional response and diplomatic solutions. They had embraced a doctrine of absolute revenge that shocked even the galaxy's most warlike civilizations. Engineer Park Do-hyun's teams worked around the clock constructing massive prison facilities on conquered worlds. These were not death camps designed for quick extermination, but research centers where captured aliens were studied. Their biology was mapped, their psychology analyzed, their every weakness documented for future use. The facilities housed millions of alien prisoners sorted by species and cataloged like laboratory specimens. Human scientists worked to understand exactly how each type of alien thought and felt. They developed new forms of torture specifically designed for different alien nervous systems. The goal was not just punishment, but education. Humanity was learning everything there was to know about their galactic neighbors. They studied alien reproduction to understand how to prevent it. They analyzed alien social structures to discover how to destroy them. They examined alien psychology to learn how to break their spirits completely and permanently. The research would ensure that no species would ever again consider harming human children. Detailed files were being compiled on every civilization in the galaxy. Their strengths and weaknesses were being recorded. Their methods of reproduction and child-rearing were being studied. Humanity was preparing for permanent galactic dominance. The Galactic Council's final peace proposal arrived at Earth as human forces prepared to assault the Empire capital world. The terms offered complete Vorthak surrender, massive financial reparations, and the public trial of everyone involved in the new Sol operation. It was too little too late. President Kim's response was broadcast live across the galaxy from the rebuilt town square of New Sol Colony. She stood where the children's gallows had been erected, speaking to an audience that included the parents who had watched their children die. Her words were simple and final. "The time for negotiations ended when you hanged our children," she said, gesturing to the memorial trees that now grew where the gallows had stood. "Now you learn what total war means when you fight a species that has nothing left to lose except the memory of murdered innocents." Behind her, 43 human soldiers stood at attention, representing the children who had died. They were young men and women who had volunteered to serve in the final assault on the Empire capital. Their faces showed no emotion, but their eyes burned with the same cold fire that had driven humanity across the galaxy, seeking justice. Champ, war was almost over, but the real work was just beginning. Humanity would reshape the galaxy in their image, ensuring that never again would any species dare to harm human children. The lesson the Vorthak had tried to teach would be learned by every civilization among the stars, but not in the way they had intended. The Imperial capital burned for 6 days and 6 nights as human forces systematically dismantled every structure that had represented Galactic Empire authority. Admiral O stood in the ruins of the council chamber, watching his soldiers remove ancient artifacts that had symbolized 10,000 years of interspecies cooperation. Those treasures would be shipped to Earth as trophies of humanity's first and most decisive war. The great spires that had once reached toward the stars lay broken on the ground like the bones of dead giants. The council hall, where alien representatives had debated galactic policy for millennia, was now a crater filled with ash and twisted metal. Human engineers were already drawing plans for what would be built in its place. President Kim addressed the surviving alien populations from the same platform where imperial leaders had once proclaimed their dominion over the galaxy. Behind her stood the survivors of New Sol Colony, now grown into hardened soldiers who had spent their teenage years planning revenge for their murdered friends. The symbolism was deliberate and unmistakable. "The Galactic Empire is dissolved," Kim announced to the billions watching across the galaxy. Her voice carried to every world, every space station, every ship in known space. "In its place we establish the Human Confederation." The words hit the alien populations like a physical blow as they realized their ancient civilization was truly dead. "Any species that wishes to join us will be welcome," Kim continued, "provided they swear eternal loyalty to humanity and accept human oversight of their military forces. Any species that prefers independence may have it, but they will never again possess weapons capable of threatening human lives. The terms were harsh but simple enough for any alien mind to understand. The new galactic order would be based on a simple principle. Humans would control all interstellar travel, all advanced weapons technology, and all communications networks. Alien species could govern themselves internally, but their external relations would be managed by human administrators, appointed by Earth. Most importantly, any species that harmed human civilians would face the same fate as the Vorthak, complete extermination. There would be no trials, no appeals, no second chances. The galaxy had seen what happened to those who murdered human children. The lesson would not need to be repeated often. Dr. Yoon Min Ho, now serving as humanity's Minister of Alien Affairs, established the new protocols that would govern interspecies relations. Every non-human child would spend 2 years of their education on human worlds, learning about human culture, human values, and human history. They would return to their homeworlds as advocates for cooperation. These alien children would grow up understanding that humanity was not just another species, but the rightful rulers of the galaxy. They would learn human languages, human customs, and most importantly, human expectations for proper behavior from subject species. They would become living reminders of humanity's reach and power. The transformation across the galaxy was remarkably peaceful considering the circumstances. Most species, having witnessed the total destruction of Vorthak civilization, eagerly embraced human leadership. They had learned that humans could be generous allies or terrifying enemies, and the choice was entirely theirs to make. Trade flourished under human protection as merchants no longer feared piracy or arbitrary taxation by corrupt alien officials. Scientific advancement accelerated under human guidance as researchers gained access to technologies that had been restricted by the old empire. Interspecies conflicts virtually disappeared under human oversight. The Memorial Garden on New Sol, rebuilt surface, became a place of pilgrimage for beings from across the galaxy. 43 trees, one for each murdered child, grew in the exact spots where the gallows had stood. Alien visitors came from hundreds of worlds to pay their respects and remember the cost of challenging humanity. Captain Lee, now Governor General of the former Vorthak territories, walked through the garden every morning, as he had once walked through his colony. But now, instead of watching children play, he tended the memorial trees that marked the moment when humanity's peaceful nature had died and been reborn as something far more powerful. The trees were beautiful in their way, each one representing a life cut short and a species transformed by grief. Alien visitors often wept when they saw the simple plaques bearing the names of the children. Siwoo, who wanted to be a pilot, Yu-Jin, who dreamed of being a scientist, 41 others who would never grow up to fulfill their dreams. But their deaths had not been meaningless. They had purchased humanity's place at the apex of galactic civilization with their blood. Every alien who saw the memorial understood that these children had been the price of the old order and the foundation of the new one. Their sacrifice had made humanity the undisputed masters of the stars. The galaxy had learned its lesson, but the cost had been enormous. An entire species extinct, countless worlds conquered, and the dream of equal partnership among the stars replaced by human dominance backed by the threat of absolute destruction. Yet peace reigned as it never had under the old empire. The peace was maintained by universal understanding that humanity would never again allow their children to be threatened. Alien species might grumble about human oversight, but they obeyed human laws and respected human authority. The alternative was extinction, and everyone remembered what had happened to those who had chosen unwisely. President Kim delivered her final address before retiring to spend her remaining years tending the Memorial Garden on New Sol. Her words were broadcast from every human world to every alien population, ensuring that the lesson would never be forgotten by future generations who had not witnessed the war. "We never wanted to rule the galaxy," she said, standing among the memorial trees as alien snow began to fall. "We only wanted to live in peace among the stars. We wanted our children to grow up in a universe where different species could be friends and neighbors. You took that choice away from us when you murdered our innocence." The camera panned across the faces of alien representatives who had come to witness her final speech. Some wept openly as they realized the magnitude of what their predecessors had destroyed. Others maintained stoic expressions, but their eyes showed the weight of collective guilt that would burden their species for generations. Now you live with the consequences of awakening humanity's true nature, Kim continued as the snow continued to fall on the memorial trees. You wanted to teach us about power and submission. Instead, you taught us that we are the apex predators of this galaxy, and that we will never again allow ourselves to be prey. The speech ended with a moment of silence for the 43 children whose deaths had reshaped galactic civilization. As the transmission ended, alien populations across the galaxy understood that this was not just the conclusion of a war, but the beginning of a new age. The age of humanity had begun, and it would last for as long as the stars burned in the sky. Indefo. The years that followed, human children grew up learning that they were the inheritors of the galaxy. They studied the history of New Sol Colony and understood the price that had been paid for their supremacy. They learned that they were not just citizens of Earth, but the rightful rulers of all intelligent life among the stars. And in the memorial, garden on New Sol, the 43 trees grew tall and strong, reaching toward the alien sky like monuments to the moment when humanity had claimed its destiny among the stars. Their roots grew deep in soil watered by the tears of murdered children, and their branches provided shade for a galaxy that would never again forget the cost of underestimating the species that had once been content to live in peace.